Hi, this is Peter McKinley from Global Philanthropic Canada, and I would like to welcome you to another Shared Brain podcast. One of the great things about Global Philanthropic Canada is the quantity and quality of fellow consultants across the country, and I'm really happy to be here with my friend and colleague, Jill Nelson. Hi, Jill, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
Now, we've come across the topic of mutual interest, one that you're very familiar with and one that I'm learning about. And that topic is donor advised funds, or DAFs as they're known. They're one of the fastest growing sources of revenue for charities in the country, in North America, really. Conversations that we've been having, Jill, have really enlightened me to a lot of the aspects of DAFs, and I thought it would be good for us to capture that conversation here in the podcast. So maybe to kick off, why, Jill, why should we be interested in DAFs?
Well, let me start with a story. This is a true story. It's about a couple who were able to save hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxes and make a $2 million gift to their community. And it, of course, involves a DAF. So these people were known as philanthropists, and as fundraisers and gift planners, we know that when money is in motion, it's a good time for people to give and for charities to ask. Now, this couple was selling their business, and that was great news for them, and also great news for the government because it was going to trigger a great deal of tax. But being generous, they really wanted to use some of what they had obtained by giving to the community. Only they had a deadline. They had to make their gift by December 31st. This was literally weeks ahead, or they wouldn't be able to use the tax relief in the current tax year. So they were sort of in between a rock and a hard place here, and they could have just given it to some of the big charities in the community, like a university or a hospital or a college. But they really didn't feel...
In one lump sum, you mean, I think. So.
What's that?
In one lump sum, they could have made one big contribution.
Yes, yes, exactly. The whole $2 million that they needed to give to get enough tax relief to help with the tax they'd have to pay. And so they could have done that, but they really wanted to look more into the issues and the conditions in their own community and other institutions that might be helping with those. So they heard about donor advised funds and looked into that. Now, I wasn't around at that point. I don't know whether they talked to their bank that they belonged to about a DAF that was associated with the bank. I don't know if they talked to any of the independents, but I do know that what they decided was to put their money in a community foundation, into a DAF in a community foundation. And that way, they were able to make the whole gift at once, establish a donor advised fund within the community foundation, and then take the time to really research what was needed. In the end, they were really happy because they were able to give to a number of local charities and the big charities that they wanted to give to. And because this fund was set up, they now will be giving year over year in the future, usually the interest from that and some of the capital too.
That's a great story. I'm familiar, and as you are, I'm sure, with a number of different donors who have that kind of capability. My experience has been, in the past at least, that couple might have thought about setting up an actual private foundation as opposed to establishing a DAF. So could you maybe tell us maybe what is exactly a DAF, and perhaps if there's some differences, how are they different from a private foundation?
Sure. They are quite different, and the differences are probably what caused this couple to decide to put this in what we call a sponsoring organization. So what is a DAF? DAF is a donor advised fund. The key here is donor advised. And what happens is it's a separate fund housed in a charitable entity. And that we often call a sponsoring organization, just to make it clear what that is, because they can be very different kinds of organizations. It is a charity, but it can be a foundation, it can be a community foundation, it can be an independent organization. And so there are also differences in all of them too. And just a few stats to give you a sense of how many there are in Canada, because this area, as you said at the beginning, is growing like mad. I took some notes from a report that Mark Bloomberg did on donor advised funds. You sent it to me, Peter, and it was really, really useful. So from CRA's 2024 data, there are 834 registered charities that claim to have a donor advised fund or more within their charity. Now, Mark notes that these can be mistakes in filling out their T3010. So this may not be the actual number, but there are hundreds, whatever way you look at it. The number of DAFs within those foundations is over 180,000. Now that includes some DAFs where they accept very small gifts and the gifts come in and out, and they have, if you think about Chimp and the Canadian Online Giving Foundation, between them, they hold 22,000 DAFs. So the landscape is very, very variable, and that's the way it is. But according to the CRA data, they gave DAFs in total gave $1.9 billion to charities last year. Wow. It helped 20,000 charities. So this is a huge force.
That is a lot of money, yeah. Do you have a sense of, that's how much money was given away. Do you have a sense of how much money there is in DAFs overall in Canada?
I do, Peter. I don't have the number at my fingertips right now. I know we're going to record another episode of this, and I could certainly give you the information then.
Okay. I'm familiar from a long time ago, really. The donor advised funds are not a new thing.
Correct.
They are familiar to me mostly from the community foundation context, where I've, in the past been pretty closely tied to a couple of different community foundations in the areas where I live. Mm-hmm. And, the characteristics of them that I knew of was their ability to connect donors to charities in the community that they might not have otherwise found out about. I know that a lot of the growth has come from DAFs being held in foundations, I guess, that are associated with financial institutions. Are there differences there that people might want to be aware of, or do those differences really make any substantial difference to the charity in the end?
Gosh, that's an interesting question. They are very different, which is why a donor who's wanting to establish a donor advised fund should look at the terms of an agreement that they may be signing to set this fund up. There are a couple of things that are common to all of them. They have to be a charity. They be sponsoring organizations. So when people talk about a bank foundation, it's not actually the bank, it's a separate charitable organization. And that's why they're able to issue an income tax receipt for the donation. So what are some of the differences? Well, the minimum amount to establish a donor advised fund varies widely, from $10,000, $25,000, $250,000. So in these sponsoring organizations, they set those rules. Another difference is that they may have different terms on which the gifts or the grants are being made from the donor advised fund. So, for example, one insists that each charity or each donor advised fund, one donor advised foundation insists that each donor advised fund within their portfolio must give away the minimum disbursement quota, which, as you know, Peter, is 3.5% of a charitable fund's non-operating money, 3.5% up to $1 million, and over $1 million, 5%. So that is to make sure that money is getting into the community.
Right, and that is similar to a private foundation, right?
Yes, and to any charity.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, good point. So that can be a bit different, but they have to meet that minimum, all of them. And the other thing to remember is that this is because the donor has given this money to a donor advised foundation or sponsoring organization and received an income tax receipt for that gift. The donor advised fund, all the amounts it disperses to charities in the future, it has to go to a beneficiary charity, and B, the charity does not give an income tax return for that, or income tax receipt for that grant.
Right. So that, I mean, that's one of the things that I find really interesting, because what that means is there is a pool of money that is sitting there that can only go to charity. It can't go in any other direction. So the timing may vary, but that is a large sum of money that you described earlier that is kind of sitting there and could be available to charities, depending on the wishes of the donor originally and the connections to the community, I guess, that the fund has.
Yeah, I'd even say should be going to charities. That's the point of these. And I'll tell you something that made me see donor advised funds in a different light. A few years ago when COVID hit, none of us expected that kind of thing coming. And there was tremendous fear in the charitable industry that this would put a chill on donor giving, that people were uncertain about their future, afraid of losing their businesses for good reason. And although humans, and in Canada at least, remained very generous and many did consider to continue to give, there were lots of ways that people weren't able to give. The events that charities ran weren't able to raise money. But there were those donor advised funds. They were sitting there with money in them with the sole purpose of being given out, just very like a private foundation that you described. And so that giving could continue to happen even if the person who had set the donor advised fund up didn't want to also give from their own pocket during that time. Right.
So there was some sustainable revenue there, basically, that
good way
really
to put it.
A lot of the much in the way that monthly donors sustained a lot of charities, where the commitment was made and the donations kept flowing, in a sense. So.
That's correct. Although a monthly donor can decide to stop giving, whereas the DAFs have to keep giving. Now, they may change their giving. They may have decided to give to food banks instead of the local hospital at that time,
right.
where the need was greatest. But they did still have the means to keep giving.
Can you talk a little bit more about how donors approach the DAFs? What's the real attraction to the donor that maybe thinking about a variety of ways of giving?
Well, there are about as many ways of looking at it as there are donors and people giving. But some of the big reasons are really, part of it is the simplicity of saying, I'm going to give all the money I'm going to give away to one charity that's then going to send all these gifts out. So there's no chasing down receipts. They get one income tax receipt. They tell the charity where they want their gifts to go, and that happens. So it's very easy, and that's part of the reason it's actually attractive in an estate planning context, because you can arguably have your will direct that the gift is made to a donor advised foundation and to establish a fund, and then the gifts go out from there. So that is one very strong reason. Then there's another, like the story we opened with, a sudden need to make a charitable gift without deciding where that money's going to go right away. And that is a very real issue for a lot of wealthy people. They didn't get wealthy by accident. They have a lot of things going on in their lives, and it's good for them to take the time and also possibly involve their families. Now, I don't think I addressed something you said earlier about private foundations and how they're different.
Right.
Because a private foundation will enable all those things too. It's a very different beast in that the family sets up their own foundation, but then they're responsible for the administration of that. They're responsible for filing the returns to CRA, all the administration, getting the applications in if they accept applications, and making the decisions about where those gifts will go, as well as all the onerous paperwork. And not everybody wants to do that. That if somebody has the money to set up a large foundation, and it would usually be $2 million or more before they would do that, they may or may not want to be up to their elbows in the administration. So the donor advised fund makes that a lot easier.
I think I'd like to explore that just a little bit more. I think that we always like to say that every gift matters, but the reality of this kind of giving is that the impact is much greater in terms of financial impact, I think. But I think that I'm curious whether you think this might be driving one of the things that we've been seeing in the sector, which is that while the number of donors overall has been declining, the amount of giving, the raw number, sheer amount of dollars, is increasing. What's your feeling about the impact of DAFs on the fact that we're still seeing an increase in overall giving in dollars, even while we're seeing the number of donors decline over the last number of years?
Absolutely. This would be guessing on my part a little bit, but I have often thought exactly that when I see that there is more money being given, but by fewer people. And from what I understand, the records of what's being given are being pulled from individuals' income tax returns. So we're really seeing what were they receipted for and what did they claim. But if somebody has now set up a DAF, sure, they may not be making their large gift every year, so that may decrease, but there's still money going to charities.
Right.
Yeah. So I think that needs to be thought about as well.
So I'm really, I mean, and when we first started talking about this, I was aware of DAFs, but I'm really grateful to you for the amount of education you've given to me and to so many others through the things that you do and your teaching with the CAGP and other organizations. I have really learned a lot, and even just today and through our conversations getting ready for today, I see that there's a large and a growing pool of money that is already earmarked for charitable purposes that charities could be accessing with the right strategy.
Yes.
I see that if the trend continues, and we're not seeing any signs that it's not, that this pool of money is going to continue to grow and grow rapidly. It's really exploded in the last decade, really, I would say. The other thing that, and my roots are originally back in prospect research, so we like to think about indicators of capacity, or it's the language that we have used, which is really, signs that people have a significant amount of wealth. which is one of the markers that we try to keep in mind when we're thinking about approaches to different types of donors. But I think, the knowledge that a person has a DAF is very likely one of the best indicators that they have above average capacity. Are there other kinds of conclusions that you would make?
Well, yes, they are affluent. They are planners. They're thinking about their philanthropy, and of course it's so obvious, but they are philanthropic. There are an awful lot of people out there who have lots of money and aren't generous with it. So I think that it's a good sign of somebody who really does care. And it's why charities need to pay attention. I may say this another time too, but one of the things that I've found concerning is when some charities don't realize that there's a donor behind the gift from the donor advised fund. They see it's from, a bank institution or a community foundation, and they think that because they don't need to receipt it, that it isn't a gift. But these are like foundations. People are making decisions about where these grants are going to go, and they should and can be stewarded. And I think we're going to talk about that issue in another episode of this podcast, which I'm really looking forward to.
Yeah, me too. I think that we have enough conversation that we've had over the months that we could go on a lot longer, I think. But for now, I think just to summarize our takeaways maybe from this are really every charity that's active in fundraising should have a DAF strategy.
Absolutely.
And that, stewardship and relationship building, which we talk about a lot, is just as important here as anywhere else. And I think, again, I would reinforce what I just mentioned a minute ago, that while we have seen the total number of receipted donors decline, DAFs may be a big part of the reason why total giving has continued to increase over the past few years, that this has possibly encouraged people to give more. So, the charities that are out there that may be listening or that talk to us as consultants at Global Philanthropic Canada, they really should be addressing what is the fastest growing component of charitable giving in the country.
Yes, I agree. Thank you for putting it so well.
Thanks very much, Jill. And as you mentioned, we're going to be carrying on in a part 2 of this conversation, which we'll be getting to shortly. I want to thank you very much for your education of me and everybody else that you have an opportunity to talk to. And I want to thank everybody who may have tuned into this podcast, and invite you to listen to the other podcasts that we have on our website. And of course, if you liked this podcast, stay tuned for part 2, which will be coming up in the not too distant future.